Nightcast. Stephen Lloyd Gilbreth brings you the current news from the world today and how it relates to Bible prophecy. Understanding the end-time events leading to the peaceful world tomorrow. Ladies and gentlemen, Stephen Lloyd Gilbreth.
Good evening, friends, and welcome to this October 2, 2014 edition of Nightcast. For our opening story tonight, we go to overseas where Ebola is spreading fast. The charity Save the Children has warned. It says 5 people are being infected every hour with the virus in Sierra Leone. There were 765 new cases last week alone, and there's not enough hospital beds to treat them there. The BBC's Umaru Fafana reports from Freetown, the capital of Sierra Leone.
No part of your body should be outside.
Training those at the forefront in the fight against Ebola. With over 60 health workers already killed by the disease, it's a very risky fight. 400 people have been through this training, including Saidu Fafana, a newly graduated nurse.
I've lost a classmate of mine, wherein I don't want to stand out again to lose another person out of this virus. So that motivated me to come.
Ebola has ripped through West Africa since it was first reported 6 months ago. Families have been decimated and children are not immune. Treatment centers are overflowing and patients turned away and sent back into communities because of the lack of health workers or beds. With large areas of the country quarantined, there is growing fear among the population. All schools across the country have been closed for the last 3 months. At least 22 teachers have died from Ebola.
Normally, on a day like this, thousands of girls should be here, learning. Not this year. No one knows exactly when schools will reopen. It's a move partly motivated to protect children and their families from the spread of Ebola. But parents and teachers are worried about the effect this will have on children's education.
Here at Kerry Town, a 100-bed treatment clinic, complete with a laboratory, is being constructed. Britain is sending its army engineers and medics to set up treatment centers across Sierra Leone. It is part of a £100 million intervention which will set up a specialist centre for infected health workers.
The situation for Ebola in Sierra Leone is critically serious. The challenges that the people of Sierra Leone are facing are unimaginable to many people outside of this region.
The impact here is immeasurable. 2/3 of the workforce are already unemployed, but now more people are being laid off as businesses close and investors leave the country. Hope is not something you see on the faces of people here. Umaru Fofana, BBC News, Freetown.
Friends, we've got the pale horse associated with this story because let me show you our chart. We'll bring it forward. Count 4 over to the 4th column where you see the pale green color. You see the horse at the top, the number 4. This on our chart is to indicate from Revelation 6 that the 4th seal is depicted by a pale horse who has a rider on it named Death, alongside whom that deadly rider and its horse, pale-colored horse, rides Hades, hell, the grave. And Jesus Christ described the primary activity of this 4th seal, this depicted again by this pale horse and the rider named Death, as loimus, meaning disease epidemics, pestilences, the plagues of Egypt. There are a couple other things that Christ said would happen between the 3rd seal and the 5th seal, but we'll cover those another time because this first thing he said, loimus, disease epidemics, relates to our first 2 stories. That one that on Ebola, and then our next one on a bullfrog invasion in the United States. Hungry U.S. bullfrog invasion spreads. Scientists are reporting an invasion of hungry American bullfrogs along the Yellowstone River in the U.S. state of Montana. The bullfrogs are said to eat nearly anything, including other bullfrogs, and pose a threat to native species. The number of the animal's breeding sites has nearly quadrupled since 2010. Efforts by state and federal agencies to contain the spread of the animal has so far failed after numbers proved too great to control. Quote, they are going to eat anything they can fit into their mouths. It doesn't matter if it's another frog or a bird or a mosquito, U.S. Geological Survey biologist Adam Sepulveda told the Associated Press news agency. Excuse me, the bullfrogs, which can grow up to 12 inches, 30 centimeters, have been found along a 66-meter, 106-kilometer stretch of river, recent surveys find. The animals are native to the eastern United States, but have spread to nearly every state but North Dakota. Those people in North Dakota must be doing something right. Congratulations to you in North Dakota. Keep it up if it's godliness, which it sounds like it may be. The bullfrogs not only eat other frogs again, but also compete against various animals for food and spread a fungus believed to cause a significant decline in amphibian populations. Scientists believe they were released by humans in eastern Montana as pets or tadpoles used by fishermen as bait. And that's the story on that. Again, that relates to that pale horse, the fourth seal of Revelation 6. Friends, our next story relates to the white horse, as we tell you about what is happening as Hajj Muslim pilgrims converge on Mecca. Muslims have gathered in Mecca for the annual pilgrimage there. The 5-day expedition is designed to promote the bonds of Islamic brotherhood and sisterhood by showing that everyone is equal in the eyes of Allah, quote unquote. Now, some of those in the crowd have been wearing face mask, a possible precaution after fears were raised that pilgrims from Ebola-affected countries could inadvertently spread the virus in the densely populated environment. Earlier this year, Saudi authorities banned people from Sierra Leone, Liberia, and Guyana from getting visas as a precaution against the virus. No case of Ebola has been found in the kingdom, and I believe we've got a video report on this. Necessarily have a video report. We just got video, and I could have and should have used this while I read you the story about what's going on there. But I'll just let you see this video of the big gathering there in Mecca for their 5-day expedition. Designed to promote the bonds of Islamic brotherhood and sisterhood by showing that everyone, quote unquote, everyone is equal in the eyes of Allah, they say there. Okay, and that again, that report would be related to the white horse. Now, related to the I think we're going to a story related to the red horse next. I got to get my notes back in position for this. Yes, we are. We're going to a story related to the red horse being the second seal of Revelation that Jesus Christ described in plain language as a seal representing war and rumors of war. It's depicted by a red horse. Heavy fighting continues for control of the airport in the eastern Ukrainian city of Donetsk. Pro-Russian forces have been battling Ukrainian government troops there, raising concerns that a fragile 4-week-old ceasefire between the two sides may soon completely break down. At the same time, the center of the Donetsk has also come under fire. Late today, a Swiss employee of the International Committee of the Red Cross was killed by shelling in the center of the city. David Stern reports from Kiev.
Pro-Russian forces at the Donetsk airport. This video from a social media website shows them fanning out throughout the airfield and occupying a hangar. They say they have taken over most of the airport's territory. The reports could not be confirmed, but in this footage, Ukrainian forces are nowhere to be seen. But the fighting there is apparently still not over. Shelling hit a fuel reservoir, sending a black plume into the sky that could be seen for kilometers. Ukraine's ceasefire has held in some places, but in others, like the airport, it never began. Ukrainian officials say the militants have attacked with tanks and rocket launchers.
The situation is still difficult in the Donetsk and Luhansk regions because of systematic breaches of the ceasefire by pro-Russian rebels. We fought off shelling and attacks on Ukrainian armed forces positions and districts many times. Donetsk airport is still the epicenter of attacks.
The death toll on all sides continues to climb, and now the center of Donetsk has been hit. A shell struck a building housing the offices of the Red Cross. One of their workers, a Swiss national, died from his injuries. Ukraine's ceasefire was shaky from the start when it began 4 weeks ago. Some pro-Russian leaders indicated they would ignore it from the beginning. This latest fighting is now causing many from the pro-Ukrainian side to ask if it's worth adhering to a ceasefire that increasingly exists only in name. David Stern, BBC News, Kiev.
And friends, you've got plenty of material to be praying about as Jesus Christ instructed us to do in Luke 21:36, where he said, watch. And he was referring, as he said, watch, he was referring back to these seals from Revelation. He was just explaining, as he answered the disciples when they asked him the question, what would be the, another question, they also asked him, what would be the sign of your second coming? And he answered them by explaining, first of all, the first seal of Revelation, the white horse. Make sure that no man deceives you. There will many come in my name, saying that I, Jesus Christ, am the Christ, and yet they will deceive many. And then he went on to explain the second seal, the red horse, depicted by a red horse in Revelation, saying that there would be wars and rumors of war and world war, nation against nation, kingdom against kingdom. We're in a recess now, as Mr. Herbert W. Armstrong has explained, between round 2 and round 3 of world war. Then he did explain that there would be scarcity of food, famines, which is the third seal depicted by the black horse. And then he explained that there would be a great martyrdom, even brother turning in his own brother and causing a great martyrdom of the saints. Or they would do this during a great martyrdom of the saints. And now I've skipped ahead to the fifth seal. I'm sorry. Then he said there would be 3 different things that happen. Loimus, disease epidemics, pestilences, the plagues of Egypt. That describes the fourth seal, depicted in Revelation 6 as a pale horse with a rider whose name is Death, alongside whom Hades, hell, the grave, rides. Jesus Christ also said that between the third seal and the fifth seal there would be seismic activity, as the Greek English lexicons explain, commotions in the air such as gale force winds, commotions on the ground such as earthquakes, but not limited to just those things. Any commotions in the air, any commotions on the ground. Christ also said that between the third seal and the fifth seal, there would be trouble, there would be disturbances, there would be troubled waters, both literally and figuratively. Figuratively in the sense of mobs and seditions, and the beginning of sorrows, the kind of trouble that's not yet the great mega trouble, the great tribulation of this fifth seal, but trouble that leads up to the mega trouble, that leads up to the great tribulation. All of those kind of things we are seeing in world news. And those things Christ described as things to watch for. And then he said, pray, watch these things, and pray always, with a promise added to it. He said, that you may be accounted worthy to escape all these things. All what things? All those four things he had just been describing in these four seals that precede the fifth seal. And he's saying, pray about these first four seals, pray always, watch them, and pray always. And that's what we help you do on this program, friends, is help you to watch primarily activities related to these seals and other things in the Bible as well. But if we watch these, as Christ told us to do in Luke 21, verse 36, he holds out a promise saying that you may escape. Escape what? What's the next thing he's got on this chart? The fifth seal, the great tribulation, a time of Jacob's trouble, a time of the revival of the old Holy Roman Empire under the seventh and final head, who will most likely be crowned where all the other heads of the Holy Roman Empire have been crowned, in Frankfurt, Germany, in the Emperor's Hall there. And some of you may remember it was blown up by the Allies toward the end of World War II. However, good old Uncle Sam, you wonderful taxpayers of the United States, through the Marshall Plan, provided the funding to rebuild that Emperor's Hall in Frankfurt, Germany, according to the original architectural design, but with brand new material now, where that building, that Emperor's Hall, is standing ready. They've got all this. They put the statues back in there and portraits of the many emperors and kings over the empires of Europe, including the Holy Roman Empire. And it stands ready for that seventh and final head to appear there with the Pope, who will hold the coronation ceremony and place the crown of the Holy Roman Empire, whether figuratively or literally, upon the head of the seventh and final head of that Holy Roman Empire, as the Bible depicts it. A beastly empire that'll be composed of 10 nations or regions from the east and 10 from the west. I've got a new graphic. I've got a story about the Pope we'll end the program with tonight. I got a new graphic I'm eager to show you, but it's in my video player in a certain order, and I'll show you that when we get to it. Got the Pope riding that white horse, got the stars from the EU flag around him, but instead of putting 12 stars like the EU flag has, I put 5 on one side in one color to represent the east, and 5 stars on the other side of the Pope on that white horse to represent the west. Just similar to how the EU flag is laid out. But there'll be some big changes when those 10 regions or nations give their power to the beast through the Pope. And with the Pope riding over the whole thing. And in association with that beast, he'll be more or less controlling it. That'll be, excuse me, the beginning of World War III, the fifth seal, the Great Tribulation, the time of a great martyrdom of God's saints. It'll be the time the two witnesses start doing their testimony in sackcloth and ashes. And we're in the time of Jacob's trouble, a time that Jesus Christ described in Matthew 24, and I believe it's in verse 34, Well, actually, he says in verses 20, 21, and 22, it's a time of trouble like no trouble ever been before it. Let's read that verse real quickly. We got more news, but just a time out for a couple of verses where Christ instructs us. Remember in Luke 21, verse 36, he's held it out as a promise. If you watch world events and pray always, making yourselves an active part of the day's world news, he promises that you may be accounted worthy to escape the fifth seal, the great tribulation coming next, the next major event to occur in prophecy. And he says in verse 20 of Matthew 24, but pray that your flight for this great escape be not in the winter, neither on the Sabbath day. For, verse 21, for then shall be great tribulation, mega trouble, such as was not since the beginning of the world to this time, no nor ever shall be. No time before what's coming has ever been as bad as what's coming in the Great Tribulation, and thankfully no time after it ever again will be as bad as what's coming. And Christ adds to this for this time period. He says, verse 22, and except those days should be cut short, should be shortened by him, his return and intervention, there should no flesh be saved alive, as the Moffat version puts it, but for the elect's sake, those days shall be cut short. By Christ intervening before mankind annihilates himself, all mankind, from off the face of the earth. And then there's something in verse 34 I was remembering I wanted to hit, where it says, I couldn't find this verse the other day, sometime last week when I was mentioning it. I scooted all around it. I got as close as verse 36, but while I was on the air live, my eye just wouldn't fall on it. But here it is, just two verses before verse 36. Verse 34, where Christ said, truly, verily, I say unto you, this generation shall not pass till all these things be fulfilled. What generation was Christ talking about? He had just said before that in verses 31, 32, 33 that when the branch of the fig tree is tender and puts forth its leaves, you know that summer is nigh. And just before this, Christ had been explaining the first four seals and the fifth seal. And he was saying, when you see all these things coming about, when you see these first four seals being fulfilled, know that summer is nigh. Applied to the fifth seal that's coming next in prophecy, when you see these first four seals accelerate, it's as if the fig tree was spreading forth her, is yet tender and spreading forth her branches and putting forth leaves. That's Christ saying to us, when you see these things ripen and get super active, as they are right now, friends. The bullfrogs, the Ebola, the fourth seal is rampant. And that's not all. There's more stories like that related to that. We just can't squeeze them all in the short time we do this program. But I hit them as much as I can, and maybe some of them I'll just give you start giving you the highlights, so you see just how super active this fourth seal, this pale horse of disease epidemics, and with a deadly rider, 700, just hundreds of people dying from the Ebola thing alone, telling us that the fifth seal, the next major event in prophecy to happen, the mega trouble, the great tribulation with a tremendous and great martyrdom of saints, that's next on the agenda in prophecy. Now, is there something wonderful, something good? Christ promises an escape from that for those who are accounted worthy, who watch world news and become an active part of it by praying, because your prayers can affect the outcome of things, how things come out here and there. When God sees you put your heart in something and you ask Him, He is our loving Father. He's very capable of saying, okay, you care about that much? I'll intervene on this one, because Mary, Sue, Tom, you were there on your knees, crying out your heart before me and praying and asking me to have mercy. I can and I will do it. Christ can do that. All right, let's get on with it. Excuse me. Our next story, we've got another story. The second seal here on our chart. They're depicted by a red horse that Christ described in plain language as war, rumors of war, and even world war, which we've had since about 100 years ago with World War I, beginning in 1914, ending in 1919, a little recess, and then having World War II from 1939, 1940 to 1945. Now a long recess waiting for round 3 of World War to come up. And our next story I mentioned to you relates to that second seal, the red horse. Tens of thousands of Kurdish refugees have passed through the border towns and villages between Syria and Turkey in recent weeks. We've been showing you video on that for the past several nights and weeks. The push by Islamic State to capture more territory and airstrikes by the U.S.-led coalition have driven many people to flee from their homes. Friends, that's certainly something to pray about. Can you imagine and put it in terms like this? What if, and it's very likely, look at Ezekiel 6:6, how God says, if you as a nation don't repent, I will allow your enemy to wipe out all of your cities. They'll all be devastated. Listen to how Christ puts that from Ezekiel 6:6. Turn there with me real quickly, if you will, or just make a note of it. Look it up in your own Bible later. Ezekiel 6 and verse 6, Christ says through the prophet Ezekiel, if you don't repent, then in all your dwelling places the cities shall be laid waste, and the high places shall be desolate. The cities shall be laid waste here in the United States. And our fellow brethren, Ephraim, you're not immune from this in the UK. God says that applies to you as one of the 2 sons of Joseph, one of the sons of the 12 tribes of Israel, Jacob. And if our peoples don't repent of some of the perverted stuff we're involved in, the perverse marriages of the same sex, the perverse pornography that proliferates the internet because of primarily the United States. Sins, we're up to here with our sins, and God's just about had it. Look at the bullfrog invasions. That's just the beginning of sorrows and troubles. And what I'm trying to ask you to do, friends, is this story we're about to play this video on, I want you to think through this as if this were happening in your hometown. Not just in your hometown down the way from you, on your very street, happening to the people in the homes around you, where everybody is suddenly fleeing. Just imagine it that way so you can pray for these people. In this story, government and international agencies have been overwhelmed by the number of people displaced, leaving many refugees to fall back on help from family, friends, or complete strangers. Rinjan Arslan reports from Surik on the border between Turkey and Syria.
Boy sits in a Turkish village just 3 kilometers away from Kobani on the Syrian border. He is watching mortar shells fall on the home he left 8 days ago.
I am looking at my country. They destroyed our houses. I am looking at my home. They bombed our village. They killed the older ones. I see that they are bombing us. I see our houses are destroyed.
Serhan Kolay has opened the doors of his small house to nearly 50 Kurdish people. They have fled from Islamic State organization attacks. Some of them are relatives who live just across the border.
We are sleeping in this house. Where can we go? We are 10 families. We take refuge in God. We take refuge in this house. There is no place to go.
Many of them have left relatives behind.
Yes, they are my son's daughters. He stayed there. These are his children. He had 4 children. Now their father died. They're orphans. We came here. We got out of our houses and came here. They killed our relatives. We took our children's hands and came here. We gathered here. We are lost here. What can we do?
I've never seen these people eat properly. They eat too little. Some of them are only eating a bite of what we have that day. Some of them are only drinking a glass of tea. That's all. Then they go out and wander around and cry.
For now, they wait. But the memory of what happened is still fresh.
We were sitting. First we heard the shelling and then the bullets. We escaped and came to these fields. Our life is hard.
Rengin Arslan, BBC News, Suruç, Turkey.
All right, friends, I hope that makes you much better able to pray. Pardon me one moment. We got our video unit hung up. There we go. More stories related to the Red Horse, friends. More things to add to your list. And if you have problem remembering what you've seen here, check our summary, either on our homepage, our archive, our archive page, or even if you're watching this on YouTube in the archive there, you'll find in the listing, just punch the more button for more description. We've got a summary of all of today's stories that we presented here on Nightcast tonight and the live program. Use that listing. Make your own notes for when you get down on your knees, or open up your little smartphone device, put it in front of you with the summary we have of today's news, and pray about each one of the things so that you are fulfilling the instruction Christ gave us to watch and pray always about these things. And remember the promise. Nothing wrong with remembering a promise when something as devastating as Jacob's trouble and the great tribulation is just ahead of us. Nothing wrong at all about desiring to be able to be accounted worthy to escape it and be taken on the wings of the 2 wings of an eagle, either figuratively or literally. God could send in a huge eagle for each one of us. Or it may be figurative. He may load us on some kind of aircraft and get us over, or he could even send chariots of fire. Who knows how God's going to do it, but that's going to be a miracle. Nobody will get over there to the place He's preparing in the Middle East, in a triangulated area that is just, which way would that be, east or west? Just east of the waterway that flows between Lake Tiberias and the Dead Sea. That's basically where that triangulation area that God says will be spared, and the only place on earth that'll be spared during the Great Tribulation is right there, and that's a wilderness area. And God says, I'm preparing a place in the wilderness to take those of you who are accounted worthy, who are watching now world news and becoming an active part in it by praying about it. Now, there's more news related to this second seal, the Red Horse of war and rumors of war, out of Rio de Janeiro. A busy road there was brought to a halt by a gun battle between soldiers and gang members yesterday. Now, this is from today's news, but this is something happened yesterday between gang members and soldiers. The fighting was near Mare, M-A-R-E, Mare, one of several impoverished areas where police or soldiers are trying to push out gangs and set up permanent posts. Verity Wild reports.
Shots ring out and motorists and passers-by dive for cover. This is Brazil Avenue in Rio de Janeiro, a busy road near the Mare favela. The violence had started earlier in the day, when rival gangs began fighting in the Mare complex of favelas, where the army have been patrolling since April in an effort to push out gangs. The authorities said one gang member was killed during the street battle. Verity Wild, BBC News.
Okay, Variety, and you were kind of quick with that report. All right, thank you very much. Appreciate that. Our next story Oh, I'm sorry, friends. I've been having a little problem with my throat. Indians across the subcontinent. You know, Modi, the new Prime Minister of India, has been in the United States holding big celebration in Madison Square Gardens in New York. Caught a lot of news attention. And he had a visit in the White House with President Obama this week. And we've got a story related to that next for you here, friends. Indians across the subcontinent have picked up their buckets and brooms to join a nationwide campaign to clean streets and public spaces. Prime Minister Narendra Modi had called on people to use today's national holiday to support his 5-year Clean India drive. The promise to improve sanitation and cleanliness was a key part of Mr. Modi's election campaign, pledging to build toilets first, temples later. Andrew North reports from Delhi.
Prime Ministers don't, as a rule, do the cleaning, but Narendra Modi is on a campaign in India against dirt.
If we can all come together and make this a people's movement, then I think we will be known for having the cleanest cities and country in the world.
But ingrained habits, like going to the toilet outside, highlighted in this activist video, have made India chronically filthy. Delhi's main railway station was giving the same warning for the start of the clean-up campaign. Here on Platform 1, with the media watching, it was having immediate results. The station has never looked so good as an army of cleaners set to work. They had time even for the rubbish bins. It may be a photo op, but campaigners say it's a major boost to their cause.
We think it's a brilliant initiative because it's been a huge challenge for us to get the public motivated in this kind of work. But when the government comes up with something like this, it's a huge push.
Passengers are just as keen, but some warn things won't change overnight.
It will take 2, 3, 4, 5 years because it has to come in the blood of the Indians. It is not in the blood of the Indian to keep the things clean.
There's no escaping the stench, even in the capital, where many people live and work next to open sewers and mounds of rubbish. Ironically, their neighbour is the World Health Organization. But people here say they want to do their bit to change.
We support Mr. Modi's Clean India campaign. It's shameful that our women have to go to the toilet outside, but let me show you why.
Then he takes me to the community toilet block built by the local government.
Oh, it's a terrible sight, isn't it? As Gauralel says, half the toilets here are completely broken. The rest of them virtually unusable because there's no water. And this illustrates the scale of the problem. It's not just about collecting more rubbish or building more toilets. It's also about building more sewers and the infrastructure to support it.
Early deaths and disease caused by poor hygiene cost the country billions of dollars every year. So a cleaner India would also be a richer one. Andrew North, BBC News, Delhi.
And friends, I've actually saved what some may consider to be the most important story of the whole night until last. This story comes from Monday's news, September 29, Monday's news. And it involves a speech that Benjamin Netanyahu gave in the UN as he railed against Iran and Hamas during his speech at the UN General Assembly meeting. Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu has warned that a nuclear Iran is a bigger threat to the world than Islamic State militants. In a speech at the UN, he said that to defeat IS but ignore Iran would be, quote, to win the battle but lose the war. Mr. Netanyahu also urged the West not to be fooled by Iranian President Hassan Rouhani's, quote, charm offensive. Talks between Iran and the world powers on its nuclear program ended on Friday last week with no breakthrough. Speaking at the UN General Assembly, now this is the caption that goes with this picture, Mr. Netanyahu said a nuclear-armed Iran would pose the, quote, gravest threat to us all. Mr. Rouhani and the UN chief Ban Ki-moon met last week. I believe we've got a photo on that. We do, because I've got a caption here for that reads, Mr. Rouhani met UN chief Ban Ki-moon last week. Mr. Netanyahu said Iran was on a, quote-unquote, as we mentioned earlier, charm offensive. He also accused Mr. Rouhani of, quote, phony tears for speaking out against IS militants in Iraq and Syria, saying Iran's leader was engaging in a, quote, terror campaign of his own. Make no mistake, Islamic State must be defeated, but to defeat IS and leave Iran as a threshold nuclear power is to win the battle and lose the war. Let me go back to the picture of Mr. Netanyahu there, because we're quoting him. Israel has repeatedly warned the West against making concessions to Iran over its nuclear program and opposes a role for Iran in the international effort to defeat Islamic State. The so-called P5+1, comprised of the UK, China, France, Russia, the United States, plus Germany, suspect Iran is trying to develop nuclear weapons, a claim Iran denies. Iran insists its nuclear program is for peaceful civilian purposes. The talks are aimed at getting Iran to agree to scale back its uranium enrichment program in return for the lifting of Western sanctions, which the United States had already been doing, ahead of really getting what we were trying to bargain for, what the United States was trying to bargain for. A new deadline of November 24 has been set to reach a deal. Mr. Netanyahu also railed against world leaders for condemning Israel's war against Hamas militants in Gaza, saying Hamas and IS were, quote, branches of the same poisonous tree. On Friday of last week, Palestinian leader Mahmoud Abbas accused Israel of carrying out a, quote, war of genocide after launching a major military operation in Gaza on July 8. In return, the Israeli Prime Minister accused Hamas of carrying out, quote, the real war crimes, saying its fighters had used children as human shields in areas where it was fighting rockets, where it was firing rockets into Israel. Israel was using its missiles to protect its children. Hamas was using its children to protect its missiles, he said. And the caption for this photo I have on the screen now for you, friends, says, Mr. Netanyahu showed an image that he said was a Hamas rocket positioned close to Palestinian children. You know, you'll remember we showed you video on that from an Indian TV firm that tried to sue us over showing that to you, or tried to get us knocked off YouTube for showing that to you, but we did the paperwork war with them, hired an attorney who knew both Indian constitutional law and India's law on fair use of current news events video. And we won that battle, thank God, and thanks to the prayers of some of you that asked God to help us. And we still have. We did not have to, they took it down for about a month during our battle, but that video is still available for you to see. in our archive where the Indian TV company just happened to be renting a hotel room right above where this rocket was set up, and it showed the Palestinians setting up a temporary blue tent while they built this rocket launcher, the blue tent to cover what they were doing. Then late night after darkness, they took the tent away, and the next morning they fired rockets at Israel, and of course Israel fired back at the place from where the rockets were launched. And where they built that rocket launcher was just right next to the UN, a UN school building there. So Hamas, as Mr. Netanyahu, Prime Minister Netanyahu is saying, Hamas is guilty of the worst war crimes by intentionally setting up a war arsenal in the vicinity of children. Now, Mr. Netanyahu also likened Hamas, Islamic State, and other extremist groups to, quote, another fanatic ideology that swept into power 8 decades ago, end quote. Another quote, the Nazis believed in a master race. The militant Islamists believe in a master faith, Mr. Netanyahu said. They just disagree who among them will be the master of the master faith. In a statement, a spokesman for the Palestinian Liberation Organization said Mr. Netanyahu's speech was, quote, a blatant manipulation of facts. You liars! You Hamas propagandist liars! That was not a manipulation of facts. That's just the plain truth. The 50-day conflict between Israel and Hamas left about 2,100 Palestinians and 73 Israelis dead. Following several short-lived ceasefires, both sides agreed to an open-ended truce on August 26, which so far has held up. Friends, that's it for tonight's report on Nightcast. God willing, and the creek don't rise. We'll be back again Sunday night. Thursday, or tonight being Thursday, it's our last report for the week. We're off Friday and Saturday night. And as I said, God willing, we'll be back again Sunday night with the day's current news. Of course, Sunday night we usually cover Friday, Saturday, and Sunday. So with the current news related to the Bible and prophecy, we'll be covering that in our next report Sunday night. God willing, and the creek don't rise, right here on Nightcast. Until next time, and maybe I'll see some of you on the weekend channel, the Sabbath service channel, for those of you who join me there. If you used to regularly join me there, you know how to get there, and I'll just leave it that way. Until next time, this is your host, Stephen Lloyd Gilbreth, saying thank you for joining me. So long, and good night, friends.
You have been watching Nightcast with Stephen Lloyd Gilbreth. Nightcast can be seen Sunday through Thursday nights here on cogtv.org. Tonight's program is also available anytime on demand in the cogtv.org video archive.